Hi everyone, and welcome to Political Forum. I'm Mike Jacobson. Tonight's question: should Chicago mayors have term limits? And more specifically, should they be limited to 2 terms? That's the subject tonight, and tonight we have former Governor Pat Quinn. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to all the audience and answer questions, so it's a great opportunity.
All right, folks, so now this is your chance. If you have a question, if you want to respond to that question, should Chicago mayors have term limits? The number's at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. That's 312-738-1060. And please let your friends and family know that we can be seen live online as well at cantv.org/hotline. And tonight, very special thing. I'm going to show you this right now. We are actually streaming this live right now on Facebook. So if you have a question about it, if you want to chime in on Facebook, I'll be monitoring this throughout the night. So please check us out, and you can put in your questions there too, and we'll try to get to as many questions throughout the night. Okay, so let's set this up. So set this up for us, Governor. What's going on, and what are you trying to do?
Well, under the Illinois Constitution, Mike, everybody in a city of our state has the right by petition to gather signatures on a petition to put a binding referendum on the ballot, not an advisory question. What binding referendum means, when the voters vote for it, that becomes the law. The mayor, the city council, they can't change it. It's done by the voters in the referendum. And it turns out that 25 cities in Illinois have put a binding referendum on their ballots. Cities like Springfield and Naperville and Des Plaines, Oak Lawn, Downers Grove, on and on. They've put a binding referendum on the ballot to have a 2-term limit on their mayor and their city council too. And so people in our city have never had a chance to do this, and so we started a couple of years ago gathering signatures. We call it Take Charge Chicago, and we want to put a binding referendum on the Chicago ballot this November when we vote for governor and all the other offices. People in Chicago would have a chance to say whether or not the mayor should be limited to 2 terms. And that would mean that the incumbent right now would not be eligible to run next year. He's already served his 2nd term. And so the voters would get a chance to vote on this and make the law. And to me, it's kind of refreshing to have a situation where the people give the rules to the mayor rather than the mayor ruling the people. We have that kind of government too often in Illinois, especially in Chicago where I live. And so we gathered 86,481 signatures. Last week we filed it. And of course the mayor and his operatives and all the king's horses and king's men, this past Monday filed a challenge on our signatures, try and keep the referendum off the ballot. Instead of wanting to compete on whether or not it's a good idea, they just want to try and take away our right to vote. And so we're going to be fighting as hard as we can to make sure that our referendum stays on the ballot and the people get a chance to speak.
So it looks like we already have our first caller of the night. Caller, are you there? Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, Governor Quinn. My name is Ray, and I agree with you 100%. Because the mayor, alderman, they're there for plenty, term after term after term, because they run everything. Every 4 years, they grease the people a few dollars, and then they get another 4 years. So I'm with you 100%, Governor, and I wish that you were running again. Because I really do, because about time we put a stop to this. 20, 30 years, same people, things are getting worse in Chicago, more people getting shot, all of that stuff. Please.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, that's a very good observation. I want to point out that, this is the first time ever in the history of Chicago. I was born in Chicago. I live in Chicago in the same house for the last 35 years. But it's the first time ever we, the people of Chicago, by our petition, have put a binding referendum on the ballot. And it is a very important issue. The mayor wants to stay in office as long as possible, but it's true of the 10 biggest cities in America, 9 out of 10 have a limit, a term limit on their mayor. New York does, Los Angeles, Houston, Philadelphia, all these big cities, but we don't have any term limit. And we at least want a chance to vote on that. But Mayor Emanuel, he thinks that we can take that away from from us. And we're going to fight very hard to protect our constitutional right, Mike. It's in the Illinois Constitution. It's crystal clear. And it's very sad that the mayor is so terrified of this referendum. He wants to send out his operatives to try and keep it off the ballot.
So we have lots of calls. We're going to get to all the calls, but I have to ask this question too. So why do you think there should be term limits? You put all the work in. Why do you think there needs to be one?
Well, I think one of the problems is the arrogance of power that the last caller just made. If you're in power too long in the same office, that's not a healthy thing in our democracy. George Washington started the whole I think, principle and tradition of a two-term limit. And as I said, most cities have this already, but why I'm particularly for it is the big money in politics now. They had a case called Citizens United, a Supreme Court case that pretty much lets all the big money operators come in and pour money into campaigns. So if you have a situation where the incumbent can gather millions and millions of dollars, it makes it very hard to have a competitive election. And that's why term limits in a lot of ways are the ultimate campaign finance reform. Mayor Emanuel last time had $25 million for his campaign. His competitors had nowhere near that. Same way this time. And I don't think that's healthy to have somebody with big money, because we don't believe in $1 one votes. We believe in one person one votes. And term limits let fresh ideas, fresh people come into the system. And I think it's a very healthy thing for democracy, especially now in 2018.
Wonderful. So it looks like we have another caller. Caller, are you there? Question or comment?
Good evening, gentlemen. I have a question. I have a comment. Why in Chicago, in terms of electing a chief executive, we don't have a primary no more? And if you're so worried about the incumbent having so much money, I'm just going to take it down memory lane. When Michael Belanet ran against Jane Byrne didn't have too much money. And then when Jane Byrne ran for re-election, she had $10 million, more money than a lot of U.S. senators. And she ran against Harold Washington. He didn't have too much money. I guess you remember Harold Washington and Pat Quinn. And I ain't going to say no more about that. If they really want to be fair, why not bring back the primary and let the people decide and the system work its way?
Well, that's an interesting point you made. I supported Harold Washington for mayor in 1983 when he first ran, and I also supported him in 1987 when he ran for re-election against Jane Byrne. Matter of fact, I was the only person in the county building or city hall who was elected. I was on the Board of Tax Appeals at the time to support Harold. I think your point is well taken, but back then it was a partisan primary. Now they've changed it. It was changed by state law, and the way it is now is they have a runoff situation. In the first round, the person doesn't get 50% of the vote in round one. The election will be February 26th, I think, next year. If you don't get 50%, then there's a runoff between the first person and the second person. And we saw that happen in 2015. I don't know what's going to happen in 2019, but I think, caller, it's healthy to say to someone, if you've had 8 years to deal with the issues of Chicago. We heard the previous caller talk about the violence. I live on the west side of Chicago. I live in Austin. I've lived there 35 years. And I think people in our community especially are concerned about the violence. If the incumbent isn't getting the job done, you should have a situation where, okay, you've had your 8 years. Now the president has a term limit of 8 years. It's good enough for Barack Obama. It ought to be good enough for the mayor of Chicago.
All right, thank you for that call. So then also the detractors would say to that, well, putting in a person for 8 years, they become a lame duck, in the second half, and also maybe the legislation that they wanted to pass can't be passed, and also gives them more time to get to know the job. That's what people are saying, saying why there shouldn't be term limits.
Well, I worked for Bill Clinton when he ran for president, and I worked for his re-election, same way with President Obama. I was there on the day he announced, a very cold day on February 10th of 2007. President Obama, at the end of his 8 years, worked very hard. I would never call him a lame duck. He worked day after day for things like affordable health care and many, many other things. But at the end of his term, he was asked about this, and President Obama said it's good to have an 8-year limit for the president because you get a fresh ideas, fresh people, fresh look. And, democracy is not a spectator sport. It is really something where we get people involved. And to me, getting more candidates to run for mayor mayor or other offices is healthy. And just to have the incumbent loaded down with millions and millions of dollars is not a healthy competition. And we'll give people in Chicago a chance to vote on this. You know, it'll be on the ballot on November 6th. And if the people vote yes for term limits on the mayor, means the incumbent now, Rahm Emanuel, will have 2 terms, and then he'll have to step aside, just like George Washington. When George Washington did this, King George in England, out there, we told him to take a hike. He had been on the throne for 59 years. We don't need a mayor in Chicago for 59 years. So part of our campaign is 8 is enough.
Looks like we have another caller. Caller, question or comment?
Yes, I would like to recommend that people take the opportunity to vote by absentee ballot. This way, more people that might end up not actually going to vote would vote because they could vote by using the absentee ballot. You'd increase the feedback you would get, which would be great.
Well, very good point, caller. When I was governor, I signed legislation to make the absentee voting process much easier for everybody, and I think that was a good reform. I also signed a bill to allow for online voter registration. You can register to vote just online. You don't have to go down to some office. But I think the most important reform we made was same-day voter registration. I signed that law in 2014. What that means is let's say you're not registered to vote, but you want to participate in the presidential election or the gubernatorial election or vote on the term limit question that we have on November 6th in Chicago, it means you can go down to your precinct and register to vote on the day of the election. And so we get more people to participate. This is a democracy. It's not a monarchy. We believe in people calling the final shot. Not the insiders. And so I tried as best I could when I was governor to make democracy work a little better in Illinois, and that means same-day voter registration and reforming the absentee system to let people vote a little bit easier, and also early voting. I signed that bill to make it easier to vote. If you're going to be busy on election day, you could go in a couple weeks before the election to vote. We had a great person who lived in Illinois 100 years ago, and she was the first American woman to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and her name was Jane Addams. The studio we're in here, she worked very close in this neighborhood. Jane Addams did, wonderful person. But Jane Addams believed in initiative and referendum and giving people a chance by petition to vote on issues as well as candidates. And she once said that the cure for the ills of democracy is more democracy. And I think that's your point with your call, and that's what we're trying to do with our referendum. To see these insiders in City Hall coming around trying to knock off our referendum, knock it off the ballot, with all their king's horses and king's men and all their operatives, it's to me, it was a very sad day indeed for democracy to see that. And we're going to fight them with every step we can to make sure that the people have their referendum, it's on the ballot, and let the voters make the final decision.
All right, caller, thank you for that input and your points. So I just want to, again, set the table here. So should Chicago mayors have term limits? That is the question tonight. We have former Governor Pat Quinn with us, who is leading a referendum to get that issue on the ballot in November. I want to let you guys know, you can see us right now live on KNTV. We're also live online on Facebook Live right there. So you can also put your comments in the bottom. We'll be sure to get to it anytime during the show. We have about 15 minutes left in the show, and it looks like we have another caller. Caller, are you there? Question or comment?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hi. So I wanted to ask this. Rahm Emanuel has been successful in keeping the referendum for an elected school board off the ballot for some time now. And I just wanted to know, since he is so skilled at this, how you think you will somehow be able to maneuver or navigate past his pretty successful attempts to keep unfavorable measures off the ballot.
Very good question, caller. I live on the west side. I was on the local school council, Sayre local school council, some years ago, back in 1990, I think it was. I was elected from my community to be on the school board. And I believe in a elected school board for the entire city of Chicago. All the other school boards in Illinois and every other town, they're elected by the people. Only in Chicago do we have the system where the mayor appoints the school board, and frankly, over 8 years, the appointments have been quite disappointing, and their performance has too. So I believe what you do, that we should have an elected school board, and the mayor has kept that off the ballot. It was an advisory question, and he kept it off the ballot by he passed 3 questions through the city council. They call it the referendum rule of 3, and they said, well, our 3 advisory referendums should go ahead of elected school board. But in this case, it's a little different, because the Illinois Constitution was passed by the voters in 1970, and it has a provision in it, Article 7, Section 11, that says that the people have a binding right of petition and referendum to to deal with the officers of their municipal government, including their term limits and so on. So this has been done in 25 cities in Illinois successfully, and we want to try it in Chicago. So what happened this summer? Well, the mayor there in late June, he got the city council together, and they put 3 advisory questions on the ballot for November 6th of this year. One of them had to do with, should we ban plastic straws in Chicago? Advisory question. Then the mayor got on TV, I saw him on Channel 11, and he said, well, Quinn's not ready. And we went ahead and we put our advisory questions on the ballot. But he didn't discuss at all the Illinois Constitution, which is crystal clear. We had until August 6th to file our petitions. We filed over 86,000 names to put a binding referendum on the ballot in Chicago, and the mayor cannot use his referendum rule of 3 to keep a binding question off the ballot. We have a fundamental right to do that, and the Illinois Supreme Court has actually looked at initiative and said it's a fundamental right of the people to have this power. It can't be taken away by mayors or big-time politicians or lobbyists. And so that's what we're going to fight for. We're not going to let the mayor with his 3 questions and referendum rule of 3 take away your chance to vote on whether or not the mayor should have a 2-term limit. Some people may say, well, let him have another term. But I think most people are going to say 8 is enough. 2 terms are enough. And we at least want to have a chance to have that vote.
Thank you for that question, Carl. Yeah, so looking at court cases, so there was a similar case that involved Calumet City. Signatures were collected for a term limits referendum, but City Council passed 3 non-binding referenda, just like what's happening right now in Chicago, pushing the term limit referendum off the ballot. So this issue went all the way to the Federal Appeals Court, and judges ruled that the rule of 3 holds up. So what makes your case different?
Well, they argued in Calumet City on the federal Constitution. Mike, they said, well, you have a First Amendment right to do this in Calumet City. Well, I think the lawyer for the folks who were trying to put a term limit on the ballot in Cal Cities did not really look at the Illinois Constitution. We have a state of Illinois constitutional right to do this. So it really isn't a federal issue at all. It's very clear in the Illinois Constitution and the cases interpreting this provision in the Constitution that we have a right to do this. And it can't be taken away by the mayor or the city council or any kind of inside baseball that they're trying. So we're prepared in court. We have to go to court to strike down any interference with the right of people in Chicago to vote on a referendum that's already been voted on in Springfield and Naperville and all these other towns, 25 altogether, and it's been voted on in New York and Los Angeles and Houston and Philadelphia. What makes Mayor Emanuel immune to the vote of the people? It doesn't seem right, and so we're going to fight hard for our state constitutional right to put this issue on the ballot. The federal court didn't even address that.
So when do you expect or hope to expect an answer? Like, how long is this going to play out?
I think that's kind of a sad thing because we filed our petitions last Monday. It's on the ballot. It's presumed to be on the ballot. Now, there are some operators who are trying to keep it off the ballot. We saw them this past week challenging our signatures, but we'll fight and protect our referendum right. But I think people should be assured, listening and watching, that this is a chance for the first time in the 181-year history of Chicago to have a binding referendum on the ballot put on by voter petition. all the people who participated from all parts of Chicago, every neighborhood. I was everywhere with our volunteers, and they're volunteers too. They didn't get paid for this. They did it out of the goodness of their heart and a belief in democracy. So we're not going to let the people in City Hall kind of push us around and try that kind of politics. That's not any good for democracy. And so we got it on the ballot. We're going to keep it there, and we want people to vote yes for our referendum.
And so some people say, why now? Like, what? This hasn't been raised in the past doing term limits in Chicago, and is this a specific move against the current mayor?
Not really. I don't have anything personally against Rahm Emanuel, but I think it is a good time because, he's finishing up his second term. And so why shouldn't we have a municipal debate among all the people of Chicago, the people going to vote for governor, this will be a big turnout hopefully, on whether or not this should be the limit of 2 terms for the mayor. They've already had this in New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Dallas, San Diego, San Antonio, and many other cities across America, Atlanta, and we should have this too. There is a machine tradition of trying to muzzle the voters. One of the callers kind of brought it up. Why not have an elected school board? At least they have a referendum on it. Should we have an elected school board in Chicago? But some of these people in City Hall say, oh no, don't let that happen. And they just want to keep the voters to the side, and they make all the decisions. I don't think that's healthy.
So if this referendum gets on the ballot, 50.1% of Chicagoans say yes, we want term limits. Then therefore that would mean that Rahm Emanuel would no longer be out. What about those who say that that's unfair because of the time spent already campaigning?
Well, he hasn't even filed petitions. He hasn't even announced his candidacy officially. The time you file petitions to run for mayor is November 28th. Or 26 maybe. That's well after November 6th, the election. So the voters will decide on November 6th what the rules are. And, if they decide, well, I'm sorry, incumbent mayor, you can't run for a 3rd term, that's what the people want. And that's healthy. I think we need to have more input from the voters. This actually happened in Broadview in 2016. There was a referendum on the local Broadview ballots, a suburb of Chicago, and they had an incumbent mayor, been there for a bunch of terms, and the people said enough is enough. We want a 2-term limit on the mayor. And so, the mayor wasn't too happy about it. He challenged it in court, went all the way to the Supreme Court of Illinois, and they said, hey, that's what the people want. I'm sorry, but you're not eligible to run. You've already had your terms, your 2 terms. And, I think, that's the way it is. Mayor Emanuel, over and over again, is attacking our right to have this referendum. Why doesn't he step back and let the voters speak? I particularly don't like the fact that they're attacking our petition passers who work so hard on this petition, especially on the south and west sides of Chicago, in some pretty tough neighborhoods. They understood that if we're going to change things and get really address the violence and so on, we need to make sure that we have a robust debate on whether or not the mayor should have term limits.
So I'm going to flip this issue on you. What, in your mind, is the benefit for a mayor not having terms? Because a lot of Chicagoans know we had Richard J. Daley for 21 years, M. Daley for 22 years.
Yeah. Well, I think as time goes on, whether it's Chicago or other cities, if somebody's in office too long, maybe they take things for granted a little too much, especially in this age of big money politics. And sometimes they don't want to make decisions. They are more interested in getting another election under their belt, another term, rather than making hard decisions. I was governor. I made a lot of hard decisions. Some of them weren't necessarily popular, but they were needed. I always said I didn't want to tell people what politicians wanted them to hear. It's what I thought the voters needed to know. And I won one election for governor in 2010. I lost one in 2014. But I had said in 2014 that if I had won that election, 2 elected terms were enough, and I was going to step aside, and I still feel that way.
So more people are going to be affected by this than the current mayor. Have you gotten any feedback from others who are running currently for mayor?
Well, you know, I tried to talk to everybody. Matter of fact, one of our petition passers, a young college lad, went up to Mayor Emanuel at the Pride Parade with his clipboard in hand, asking the mayor to sign the petition, the incumbent mayor. He declined. But, you know, and some of the candidates, I tried to talk to all the candidates about the issue. I haven't endorsed anybody. I just said, here's a petition drive. This is the essence of democracy. If you want to help, you know, here's a clipboard, here's a petition.
Right.
You know, it's good to get to know people that way. As I said, we were all over the city gathering signatures in parks and movies and all kinds of things. And it was a good experience just to have the petition drive. And I want to salute all the volunteers. They're not celebrities. They're real good people, men and women who took time out of their daily lives to go get signatures on a petition for this cause.
Looks like we have another caller. Caller, are you there? Do you have a question or comment for the former governor?
I certainly do. It's the Mighty Quinn on TV. How you doing, Mr. Pat?
Well, I believe in the Mighty Quinn. Yes, that was a great song many years ago. But
I'll never forget that. I never forget you on the Sun Times. The Mighty Quinn is here. I tell you, since you left office, sir, we have had nothing but trouble with this Manuel guy. I don't know who voted for him 2 times, but it wasn't me. We need to get Mr. McCarthy in here. I think he might do a good job. What do you think, Mr.
Well, I'm not going to endorse anybody, and I was governor. I don't like the current governor. He beat me in the election, but I think when people found out all the bad things he did after the election, then maybe they regretted their vote and wanted me back. Well, who knows, you know. But I did my best in that campaign, did my best when I was governor. As far as the mayor's race goes, I think competition is healthy. There's plenty of candidates. I just think this is the best time to have a referendum on whether or not the mayor should have more than 2 terms. They had this referendum in the biggest city in America, New York City, and the people said 2 terms are enough, 8 years as mayor is enough, and I think we should have that debate in Chicago for November 6th.
Looks like we have another caller. Caller, are you there?
Hey, yes, and thanks for taking the call. Just a real quick question. I want to ask, if you had the authority, would you release our ex-governor?
Yeah, I don't have the authority. I did almost 5,000 clemency cases when I was governor, the most of any governor in state history, maybe American history. And I acted even on my last day as governor to do justice to people who were wrongly convicted or imprisoned wrongly. So I thought that was the important thing to do. In the case of Rod Blagojevich, he was convicted as a federal crime, so the governor had no right to do clemency. But my view on that one is you must say you're sorry. You must express remorse. Every clemency I gave to the people, and there were literally hundreds and hundreds, I always want to make sure they were regretful of the mistake they made. People make mistakes, sometimes when they're rather young, and they don't want that to be over their head for the rest of their lives, and I understood that. But I always wanted people to say, okay, I have remorse, I'm sorry, I apologize. Rod Blagojevich hasn't done that. He just blames the justice system, and I think he has to rethink that and accept responsibility and accountability. Otherwise, I don't think he should be granted clemency.
Thank you for that question. We're almost wrapping up here. I got like a little less than 2 minutes. I got 2 questions though. Number 1, what do you say to people who say a referendum aside, just leave it up to the voters to do? Like come in February for the election.
Well, that's the problem. We said earlier that term limits are the ultimate campaign finance reform. If the incumbent, in this case Rahm Emanuel, has $25 million and all of his competitors put together have like 1/10 of what he's got, is that a fair election? And I think people are very concerned about big money, the incumbents helping the insiders, the 1%ers getting a whole bunch of campaign money, making it very difficult for the challenger ever to win.
And then also, how can people learn more about this referendum and just learn about the issue?
Well, it's a grassroots movement. We're called TakeChargeChicago.org. You can go on our website and learn more about what we're doing. We have a phone number, 773, and it's 999-2016. 773 area code 999-2016. And, we need volunteers right now. We're down at the Board of Election Commissioners, 69 West Washington, protecting our signatures from these operators of the mayor who want to try and knock us off the ballot. We're on the ballot, and we're going to win this referendum, and we're going to do it in the best traditions of American democracy with a grassroots movement that lets the people speak.
All right, thank you so much.
Very
Former
good,
Governor
Mike.
Pat
Yeah,
Quinn,
good
for
to
having
see
us
you.
on tonight, for joining us tonight. And please also, folks, if you want to watch this show or any other show from Political Forum, please go to kntv.org/political forum. You can catch all shows ever done. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, for watching, and we will see you next time. Until then, everyone have a good night.